Day 12 concludes in the Karen Reed trial with Colin Albert on the stand and cross-examination set to begin tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be a half day, so just a half day on Thursday and then a full day again on Friday. So the trial is moving along. Today we started off with Julie Nagel. Julie Nagel is how we concluded yesterday's day 11, and it just started off very briefly finishing up testimony with Julie Nagel. Julie Nagel was one of Brian Albert Jr.'s friends who came to the house to celebrate his birthday with him, and her brother came to pick her up, which eventually she decided not to go with him and later took a ride home with Jennifer and Matt McCabe. So they discussed Julie Nagel coming out to the car, having a discussion with her brother, and eventually deciding not to go home with her brother, her friend, and her brother's ex-girlfriend, which all of them were called to the stand today. Nevertheless, Julie Nagel also testified something very important, and that is that she noticed a black object in the lawn. So she noticed this black object in the lawn as they were passing by when she left that night. Okay, so that was eventually when she did leave with Jennifer and Matt McCabe and Sarah Levinson. She did notice this black object, which also she testified yesterday was 5 to 6 feet long. So something that the prosecutor right away said, if you would have noticed that that black object was a body, what would you have done? And she answered, I would have called 911. And then cross-examination was, well, the next day when you acknowledged that you put two and two together to realize that that body was actually, that object that you saw on the lawn was actually a body because you put two and two together the next day, you didn't call the police, did you? Not only that, you didn't call the police the next day, the next week. You didn't tell anybody about it. Why not? But, of course, you don't ask that question, why not? But you just point out that she did not do that. And that looks like she is not being so truthful by telling the prosecutor, yeah, of course I would have called the cops. And then the next day, she doesn't. All right, also, this part about that black object being 5 to 6 feet long, the first time they were ever mentioning that fact, that detail, which is an important detail, wasn't just a small little black box that you noticed. It was something actually that was big, 5 to 6 feet. That also only came out during testimony today. All the other previous interviews or discussions or statements that you gave, it never came out. All of a sudden you decided when we show up to trial that you're going to say that it's 5 to 6 feet long. So that was another part that cross-examination brought out about Julie Nagel. Then Terry Kuhn, a veterinary expert, DNA expert, was called to the stand, and she got 2 samples from the state's lab, and she was supposed to test them to see if there's any DNA, any dog DNA, any type of animal DNA on those swabs, and she listed a number of different animals that it would test for. But what do you know? She did not see any K9 DNA on those 2 swabs that were taken and sent to her from the state lab. So if John O'Keefe was attacked by a dog, don't you think that some K9 DNA would show up on these swabs? And what do you know? They did not show up on the swabs. However, she did find results for a pig DNA. So some remnants of a pig DNA was on those swabs. And she explained that it could be that it's from food. It doesn't have to necessarily mean that you were hanging out with pigs in a pigsty. It could be you were eating something that is pig-based, and that's how that DNA was detected. And something that was brought out in cross-examination was actually some dog food has some pig-based DNA, or has some traces of pig in the food, and it could be that the dog's food actually was what was picked up on these DNA swabs. All right, so cross-examination, he just brought out very strongly, Alan Jackson, he brought out that obviously when you're testing these DNA swabs, your test is only as good as whatever process that the DNA was collected in. So if it was collected in a contaminated, unsterile way in solo cups, for example, and then sent to your lab, obviously your DNA testing is not going to be so accurate when all this contamination can happen with the DNA samples. And of course, she acknowledged that, right? She's just getting the DNA samples. She's assuming that everything was done properly, but it's very positive. You know, if something wasn't done properly, then of course her test is only going to be as good as whatever process was utilized before. So also he brought out that you, in your lab, you maintain very detailed logs showing specific chain of custody, who's touching what when. So it's very clear in your lab, and already we've seen how it was not that clear with the collection of the evidence at all. And now in the DNA report, where she was saying that there was no K9 DNA detected, she did say that there's 3 possibilities why there's no K9 DNA detected. Number 1 is that it's not there. It's not present. That's one possibility. The other possibility is that there is an inhibitor, and the inhibitor corrupted the sample. And number 3 is that the sample is so degraded, it's been so degraded through a process beforehand that they cannot detect DNA. So 3 different options. Just the fact that you did not find K9 DNA does not necessarily mean that K9 DNA was not originally there. It could be it was there, but there's an inhibitor there that's making problems, or it was degraded. And then he asks her to explain the phrase, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So this is really a term more used in the medical field, seems like, or in the science field, research, that the idea is that just because you don't find evidence of something doesn't mean that that's evidence that that thing does not exist and that that thing is not there, right? So this would be the perfect example of this. You did your tests and you did not find K9 DNA, which means that there was an absence of K9 DNA evidence. But that doesn't mean that the fact that you didn't find it, that it doesn't exist or that it was never there. It's possible that it was there and just that it was inhibited or that it was degraded or for some other reasons that you could not detect the K9 DNA. So that was an important part that he wanted to bring out. He asked her to explain it to the jury, but there was an objection and the judge did not allow her to explain that phrase to the jury. Also, he pointed out that we have to understand how this DNA was collected. There has been no saliva. There's no saliva that was detected or tested from the dog to get a DNA test. And he was talking more about the scratch marks. If these marks on his arm, assuming that's what he's referring to, these marks were on his arm were actually from claws, then it's possible that they would not find K9 DNA because claws are not the greatest area to find DNA. It's not rich with DNA, and it has something called keratin in it. And this keratin is not a good source to get DNA. And if that's what caused these injuries to John O'Keefe on his arm, so then it's also, again, reasonable that you would not find K9 DNA. So that was with respect to Terry Kuhn. Then we had Ryan Nagel take the stand. Now remember, Ryan Nagel was is Julie Nagel's brother, and he was the one that came with his friend. His friend was the one who drove this truck, this F-150, and Ryan Nagel was sitting in the passenger seat, and they came to pick up Julie Nagel. And he testified that, yes, he received the text to pick her up, and a lot of this testimony from the next few people are going to sound very redundant. They did see this black SUV, right? Everyone's describing this black SUV, which we all understand to being Karen Reed's SUV. And they were coming in together to Fairview, and the Karen Reed's car went first, and then they were behind it, and they parked behind the car. The car moved up a little bit, and they testified that, or again, Ryan at least testified that he didn't see anybody come out of the SUV and go into the house. Didn't see anybody. So as long as he was there, which he came right after the Karen Reed's car, nobody exited that vehicle and went into the house. He didn't see anybody exit the vehicle and go into the house. He did see it move up a little bit. And then as they were passing by, this is what his testimony was. As he was passing by the dome light, Meaning, so after Julie Nagel went back inside, decided she's not going to take the ride, and they were going to leave then. So his friend, who was driving the truck, passed by the Lexus, which was, we understand, is Karen Reed's car, and Ryan looked in to the Lexus. He looked in to see what was going on. Now, his testimony was that he actually was looking really more to see that his sister got into the Albert house, and of course, since the car is blocking his view, so he naturally did see into the car. Not to suggest, of course, that he was looking into the car just because he was he wanted to see this pretty girl in the car. That's not what he was doing. He was really, at least this is his testimony, that he was just wanting to make sure that Julie Nagel got in okay. And of course, since the car was blocking his way, he did see that the dome light was on. So the interior light was on in Karen Reed's car. And he noticed that sitting in the driver's seat was a female with long hair. So, which we all understand to be Karen Reed. Now, another thing that he said was that when Julie came out to the car, he opened the car door. Remember, he's in the passenger seat, and he opened up the car door to speak to Julie. So Julie was talking to him with his car door open. All right, so that came out, and on cross-examination, it was brought out that he's never been contacted by the Albert or McCabe families at all to discuss what he saw. On February 7th, 2022, he was interviewed by Trooper Proctor. And he also testified that there was no other car between his car, the car that he was in, this F-150, and Karen Reed's car. There was no car in between. He also brought out that how long were you actually talking to Julie Nagel? At some point, he said there was 30, 40 seconds. At another point, he said it was 5 minutes. So he tried to catch him on that a little bit. Okay, whether it was 5 minutes or 30, 40 seconds, it's not the greatest gotcha moment. Didn't notice any broken taillights. And he also testified that, of course, he did not see the SUV move up 60 feet and then slam into reverse and gun it to hit someone, presumably John O'Keefe. He didn't see that either. Now, another thing interesting, in order to put this all somewhere in your brain when you're thinking about this case, when he passed the SUV, so this is when Ryan Nagel passed the SUV, and he was looking to see that his sister Julie Nagel got into the house okay, and he happens to see inside the Lexus, Karen Reed's car, and he happens to see Karen Reed in there, and the dome light was on. He also did not notice any other male in that car. So he didn't notice John O'Keefe in the car. So let's just think about this for a second, because this is what's going to keep coming out. This is the recurring testimony from these next few people. Everyone's going to testify. They saw that SUV. They came in at the same time to the street. They were parked behind that SUV. And then when they passed that SUV, they only saw a female in that SUV. And they never saw any male go into the house. Well, then the question is, what in the world happened to John O'Keefe? Did he just disappear into thin air? Nobody saw him go into the house, and now you're passing by the car, and nobody sees him in the car. So what exactly happened? Where was he? Did he get out of the car and was hiding somewhere by the car where no one can see him? And then only after Ryan Nagel left, then that's when Karen Reed got this idea to move the car up more, wait for John to be 60 feet behind her, slam it into reverse and gun it, and John O'Keefe just stands there waiting for the car to hit him. So we still have some questions with this case. I mean, there's always going to be questions with this case, but even just this testimony about where in the world did John O'Keefe go? If he didn't go into the house and he wasn't in the car and they pulled in together down that street, what happened in between those 2-3 minutes? Where did he go? Where was he? Nobody saw him. Something to think about. Maybe one of my intelligent viewers can let me know and leave a comment. Where do you think he went during those 2-3 minutes? All right. And then we had Heather Maxson, who Heather Maxson was Ryan Nagel's girlfriend. So at this point, it's his ex-girlfriend. They're not together anymore, apparently. But at that time, they were going out, I guess. So she also testified, and she testified that she saw Karen Reed, who was the driver of the car. And she said that Julie did come out, speak to Ryan, spoke to everyone, and she said that actually Julie spoke to the entire car. She didn't just speak to Ryan. She was like talking to everybody. And she was talking through the window. So not that the door was open, as Ryan testified, but she was talking through the window to everybody. And she invited everybody in. Do you want to come in? And nobody wanted to go in. They all wanted to go home. They already been out for hours. They want to go home and go to sleep. So they weren't interested in going in. And then Julie said, fine, I'm going myself, and then I'll get a ride home with somebody else. Okay. Now, something else that Heather testified to, which is not really so important, but it's just something that I caught, is that Julie was inside. This is what Heather testified to, that Julie was already fully inside the house before their truck pulled away. So before this F-150 that Ryan Nagel and Heather Maxson and Ricky D'Antano were in, before that truck pulled away, they made sure that Julie was in the house already. So now, as they're passing by this car, this SUV, this black SUV, that just tells us why really Ryan was looking into that car. He wasn't looking to make sure that Julie Nagel was inside the house because he was caring about his sister. He already made sure that she was in the house. That was what Heather's testimony was anyway. So why was he looking into that car? Most likely because he was curious. What's going on in that car? Sees a girl in that car, sees a girl alone, sees the dome light on. He's most likely, if I had to guess, and this is just pure speculation at this point, but if we were to believe Heather Maxson, that really Julie was in the house already before they left, then the only possible reason that he looked into the car is because he was just curious to see what was going on in there. All right. Well, anyway. And Heather also testified that she only saw Karen in the car, not John O'Keefe. So again, a question, where in the world was John O'Keefe during these few minutes? Okay, cross-examination. She testified that the first time that she was interviewed was September 1st, 2023, so a long time after this incident. She also testified that there was no Jeep Wrangler with a plow attached to it between the truck and the SUV either. There was just the truck, the F-150, and Karen Reed's SUV. And she also testified that she spoke through the window, as we spoke about, and... okay, and then on redirect, all he said was, well, you didn't see John O'Keefe walking to the house, right? And she said, yeah, I did not see that either. All right, going on to Ricky D'Antano. Ricky D'Antano also said he never saw anyone get out of the SUV. He conversed with Julie through the window also, corroborating with Heather Maxson and not with Ryan Nagel. Whether this is a big deal or not really doesn't, I don't think it makes such a big difference whether she was conversing through the window or the door was open. He actually said he doesn't recall the SUV moving up. So the other two, Heather Maxson and Ryan Nagel, said they do remember the SUV originally starting by the mailbox and then moving up a few feet, but Ricky does not remember that. Okay, cross-examination was that, again, no one interviewed you from the state police for the entire 2022. First time he gave any sort of statement was in May 2023, and the first time the state police spoke to him was September 2nd of 2023. So again, showing that this investigation was not done properly. So that came out in cross-examination. Then we got to Allison McCabe, Allie McCabe. And Allie McCabe plays a very important role here because until now, everyone's been wondering how in the world did Colin Albert get home from Brian and Nicole Albert's home? All right, so how did he get home? How did Colin get home? Well, the story came out that Allie McCabe, who is Matt McCabe and Jennifer McCabe's daughter. She was in the same class as Colin McCabe. And what was interesting that came out, I don't know how this got in here, and I don't know why there was no objection to this, but there was a nice story that while she was out that night, they found a lost dog, a lost puppy, and they returned the puppy. And so that came out, and that's always nice to show that this witness is someone who's taking care of a lost dog. It can't hurt to have that information come out, but there's no objection to that, so it just kept going on, and that was the story. So really nothing to do with any of the testimony, but that did come out. And then she had this text message exchange between Colin and herself, where Colin was asking her, can you come pick me up? and she eventually came and picked him up. So there was these clear text messages back and forth between Colin Albert and Allison McCabe. And she showed that screenshot that she took of that. On cross-examination, it was brought out that Colin is her best friend. So again, to show that there's a connection there and that they don't want to get each other in trouble. So to show that there's a close relationship there. Colin is certainly one of her best friends. Grew up together in the same class. And no investigators ever asked for that screenshot of the text message for the entire 2022. And the only time that it was turned over was in the summer of 2023. No law enforcement asked to do an extraction on her phone. And then she also upgraded her phone, although she testified that, of course, everything was backed up onto the new phone. It was all transferred over. But nevertheless, she did say that she upgraded her phone. And in August 25th, 2023 is when she first mentioned this text message exchange with an interview, in a Zoom interview. And he did bring out that, hold on a minute, if you deleted some of the text messages in between those messages, would we even know about that? And of course the answer is no, we wouldn't know about that because it's deleted and there's no extraction, there's no recovery of that. It's just the screenshot that you decided to take and show everybody. So that screenshot could be after you decided to delete certain text messages, right? So of course she said, yeah, sure. And she didn't fight this. And I thought that she testified well in terms of not fighting with the defense, not showing that she's not willing to give in. Like some of the other Alberts that were testifying, it seemed that they were trying to paint a certain picture and trying to get around some of the questions that the defense was asking. And whenever you do that, you're showing to the jury that you're trying to manipulate the story a little bit. And now you can be saying 100% the truth, but still, and trying to convey a certain message and still arguing with the defense attorney. That's what he wants you to do so that he can point that out to the jury later, that they're not giving you straight answers and they're trying to give answers to questions that you're not asking and things like that. And here, I thought that she did a pretty good job in testifying by just completely acknowledging what the questions were asking. So I thought she did a good job on the stand in terms of, in general, from all the witnesses that we've seen so far. I thought that she was actually seemed to come across as honest. All right, so now there was this other app on the phone, which is Life 360. And on Life 360 is some way that you're able to track children, where they are, what they're doing at certain times. And they had this app on, and he went through a number of the different entries that he was able to pull off from a report from this app called Life 360. And he, according to her story, that as soon as she picked up Colin Albert and dropped him off, she went home and that she was done for the night. And according to this app, there's a lot more activity that she was engaged in. She was at the school, and then she was back at home, and then things going on till 1:30 in the morning, which certainly seems very suspect. That if she's claiming that she was home, what's all this action, all this activity? Driving 7 miles, 12 miles, whatever it is, all these miles she's driving. Now, if you were listening, and this struck me as I was listening to the cross-examination, and as he was talking about certain times, like at one point it was like 1:30, and then the next entry was 1:32, and she drove 12 miles. That didn't make a lot of sense. In 2 minutes you can go 12 miles. He didn't bother explaining that, but that certainly did come out on redirect, that the prosecutor said, is there something that seemed to be off about this app? And she did say that, yeah, next to every single entry that he was talking about, there was something that said something about turn Wi-Fi on. So it didn't seem that it was really connecting well with the phone, this app. Maybe she wasn't connected to the Wi-Fi or whatnot, and it wasn't really accurate. And just by the miles and the times, even on cross-examination, some things didn't add up. So whether it was worthwhile to go through that, I mean, maybe to point out something that, the app is completely wrong. Maybe it's got some miles wrong. Maybe it's got something wrong, but it's completely wrong that it recorded you doing certain things that you literally didn't do. You were sleeping in your bed and it recorded you running around. So I'm not exactly sure where that's going, but he did point that out on a redirect. I think he did a pretty decent job rehabilitating her by saying that the Wi-Fi is something wrong with it and that it's not possible even to travel some of the distances that it said she was able to travel. And then he spoke about the harassment, and he started asking her what happened that all of a sudden August 2023 you were talking to investigators, and you were talking about this text message exchange. And he wanted to get into the harassment, and there was an objection. And the judge overruled the objection. And why is that? The reason is the phrase that lawyers fear the most. This is the last thing that lawyers want to hear. And that is, sorry, sir, but you opened the door. If you open the door, then now the other side gets to cross-examine or direct examine, whatever. There are a lot of asked questions about that instance. You can't ask a certain question and only get the information that you want and not allow the other side to then explore more and give more context and more explanation for why that fact came out. So you got to be very careful with this, especially when you have motions in limine and when you have rulings that nobody is aware about when they're watching. There are certain things that the lawyers know that nobody else knows because they've had meetings in chambers, because there's orders, because there's these motions that were filed prior and orders that were entered into, and that was that there are certain things that you're not allowed to go into. But if you do go into it, or one side goes into it, even if before you ask the judge to keep it all out, but if you decide yourself to bring it up, then the judge is allowed to give the other side the option to explore more and get more context. And that's exactly what happened here. So they're trying to make a point. This was on cross-examination. This is Yannetti, again, on cross-examination, trying to bring out that you withheld all this information for many, many months. What happened all of a sudden? Well, he didn't ask what happened, but he was insinuating that all of a sudden you're talking about this in August 2023. Well, the prosecutor got up and said, Mr. Lally, and said, well, what did happen until August 2023? Tell me, did anything change in your life? And she said, yeah, we were harassed. And even though the defense tried to object and keep all that information out, it was too late. They opened the door. And that's what the judge's ruling was. And once they opened the door, it's fair game. And the prosecutor therefore brought out, and Allie cried on the stand. And I don't know, I'm sure some people are going to say that it wasn't real tears. It was crocodile tears. I don't know. It looked pretty authentic to me. Okay, that's my personal opinion, and I'm sure the defense was not happy that came out, that they were harassed and that there was people calling nonstop and emailing nonstop and calling her school or emailing the school, wherever they are, Colin and her are, and you just feel bad when you have a very young girl on the stand. And again, to paint her into this conspiracy like she's all involved, even though she just picked up Colin and took him home, allegedly. So, it's not exactly what the defense wanted to come out. So, but that came out, and it was too late. So that was essentially her testimony. And then we got on to Colin Albert. So Colin Albert just testified essentially everything that we know already. And one thing I think which was left open for cross-examination. We'll see if I don't know who's going to conduct a cross-examination, whether it's going to be Alan Jackson or Yannetti. But remember what we spoke about, that when he came home, he immediately went up to his parents' room, right? That was the testimony so far. He went up to his parents' room and he said goodnight, which is very understandable. Good night, I love you. But according to his mother, he said, and this is Julie Albert, she said that he also asked how you're doing about her migraine. And I wondered how he found out about the migraine. Did the mother tell him before? Did he know before? How did he know about this? Anything to do with this migraine? Now, according to one of the accounts, is that no, he just came up and said goodnight. And that's how it seemed to sound from direct examination, that he just came up and said, good night, I love you. Nothing to do with the migraine, nothing to do with how you're feeling. But his mother, Julie, did say that he asked about how she's doing. Is she doing any better? How's her migraine? So I wonder if that's going to be explored tomorrow during cross-examination. And then direct finished, and the judge, there was about 10 minutes left, and the judge asked Mr. Jackson, I guess Mr. Jackson is going to be, Alan Jackson is going to be conducting the cross-examination. She asked him, do you want to start cross-examination now, or do you want to just start tomorrow? And his answer was, yeah, we may as well just start tomorrow. And that really is the gut reaction. That's generally the reaction that, okay, it's the end of the day. We only have 10 minutes left. You have 5 minutes left. Why should we even start with a witness? Why should you even get a witness out? Let's just start tomorrow. Give me a whole night to prepare, and then I'll come out swinging tomorrow morning. And that's really probably what most lawyers would answer. But I want to point out one time where it may be a good idea to get the witness. The witness is there already, and if you can bring out one or two really strong points, if you have a very strong point, this is just trial tip, okay, for all you lawyers out there or aspiring lawyers. If you have one or two great points, let's say you have a whole long cross-examination, and not all your points are going to be amazing, but if you've got one or two really strong points, it may be worthwhile to say, Judge, you know what? I'm just going to start quickly now. We'll just make a few, some quick questions, and then, yeah, we're going to leave it over for tomorrow. I'll leave the rest for tomorrow. And you get up there and you make a very strong one or 2 points, and then you say, Judge, okay, I think we'll just leave it here. And that way, that's what the jury ends off with the day. That's what they go home thinking about, those last one or two very strong points that you made in your cross-examination. So, does Alan Jackson have one or two really strong points he's going to get on cross-examination? Well, if he believes that he does, then he could have ended the day on a really strong note with saying, yeah, you know what, I'm going to ask a few questions, and then we'll just continue tomorrow, and then boom, knock it out like that. Anyway, maybe he doesn't have such strong cross-examination, or maybe he just disagrees with me in general. So, but that's what I think when in this type of situation. Don't always say, we're just going to wait for tomorrow. All right, well, that is it for day 12. We will keep you posted on the next few days of trial. This is certainly, every single day is another interesting day in this trial. So thanks for watching. If you haven't liked, please subscribe, like, and we will see you next time.